Summer is hands down the best season. That's a hill I'll die on. My love for summer isn't about partying or drinking, as you might expect. It's about nature, warm weather, and the outdoors. When the heat rolls in, I spend more hours outside than inside. One warm night in mid-June a few summers ago, I was 17 or 18. For context, there's a massive nature reserve near my house. When I say massive, I mean it. It's close to 1,000 acres. Even today, there are parts I'm sure I haven't explored. Two friends and I agreed to spend a night camping in those woods. Technically, camping there was strictly forbidden and borderline illegal, but we figured no one would catch us in this dense forest. We just had to trek as deeply as possible. Eddie was the camping fanatic of the group. This kid loved cosplaying as a Boy Scout and probably knew close to 100 different knots. Our other friend, Rick, always supplied the drinks. If we were sober, he was unhappy. That's just how things went with Rick. I remember the gentle summer breeze blowing through my hair as we packed up Rick's car. The weather was ideal, not too cold, not too hot. A few beers later, the three of us found ourselves lugging camping equipment through the woods at around 11:30 p.m. I was starting to feel the alcohol as we marched along. Eddie always carried this industrial-grade flashlight, so the darkness wasn't much of an issue. Despite my love for the outdoors, traversing through thick woods at this hour was a bit creepy, even with Eddie's flashlight. After close to half an hour of walking, we found ourselves in a small, flat clearing that was perfect for setting up camp. We pitched our tent under Eddie's instruction and set up our chairs. The next step was the fire, which Eddie also took charge of. After a few minutes, we had a decent fire going. Rick tossed me another drink and grabbed his speaker, starting to play some music. The vibe was perfect, and we talked and drank for a good 2 hours. We were all pretty drunk by then, and I could tell the guys were ready to pack it up for the night. Rick turned the music down and started collecting discarded beer cans. Suddenly, a deafening whistle pierced the silence. I nearly jumped out of my seat, going from a drunken haze to high alert in seconds. The whistle was abnormally loud but still sounded distant. Rick quickly shut the speaker off and we sat in silence, exchanging concerned looks. I could feel my heartbeat pounding. We listened intently, but there was nothing. It almost seemed quieter now than when we first got there. Not even the normal wood sounds you'd expect. I replayed the whistle in my head. It wasn't an animal noise. It sounded like a standard whistle you'd hear at a ballpark. Eddie finally broke the silence, quietly urging us to pack up and leave. Rick and I disagreed. We might risk encountering whoever made the noise, which terrified me. It was past 3 a.m., and an encounter this late would only mean trouble. Eddie hypothesized that whoever made that noise was aware of our presence, which was chilling. I didn't know what to do. Staying violated every survival instinct I had, but leaving didn't seem much better. We agreed to wait it out. I went to put the fire out, but Eddie cautioned against it, saying a fire would repel dangerous animals. Only then did the true gravity of the situation hit me. We were miles from civilization. It was 3 a.m., and there was an unknown entity somewhere in the darkness. Another 10 minutes passed, and we resumed talking, but at a lower volume, with no music. I don't think any of us felt safe sleeping just yet. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Something small flew over Rick's shoulder and landed in the fire. It was a firecracker. I screamed as it started sparkling in the fire, and Eddie cursed, springing up and bolting into the darkness. Rick and I scrambled to follow, leaving our stuff behind. We caught up with Eddie, whose flashlight was beaming wildly as he sprinted. We ran until we couldn't anymore, and Rick keeled over and threw up. Eddie shut the light off, and we stood there, panting, trying to figure out if we were being followed. Surprisingly, it didn't seem like anyone was. I don't think I've ever been so afraid. Why would someone do that? We needed to figure out what to do. Rick wanted to find our way out and never come back, but Eddie was reluctant to leave his camping gear behind. Plus, the fire was still active. I was dumbfounded. How could he be concerned with forest fire after what had happened? Eventually, I agreed with Eddie to at least check on the site. No one had chased us, so maybe it was just a cruel prank. Eddie, a navigational expert, retraced our steps. We saw the fire's glow as we approached. Before I could get closer, Rick put a hand in front of me, pointing with a horrified look. I strained my eyes to see what he saw. There were 3 people sitting motionless in our chairs like statues. The one whose face I could see looked lifeless, mouth hung open. They weren't even talking. This wasn't normal. We watched a little longer before deciding to back off. We turned to leave, but Rick's foot clipped a rock, causing him to curse. Within seconds, the fire's glow went dark, as if covered by a cloak. It was freakishly fast. We didn't stick around another second. We sprinted out of the woods and ran to Rick's car. By some miracle, we weren't followed. None of us spoke on the drive back, lost in our thoughts. The next day, Eddie insisted we return to the site to collect his belongings. Rick wanted no part of it, but I agreed to accompany Eddie. After some searching, we found the site, mostly untouched, until we got closer and noticed the putrid smell from Eddie's tent. He unzipped it, revealing a dead, rotting rat. It was sickening. I took the hint and haven't been back to that reserve since. Last summer when I was 22, I wasn't much of an outgoing person. Any social activity I participated in was usually because my persistent friends dragged me out of the house. This was supposed to be one of those times. My friend Alex invited me to a house party around 8:01 p.m. It was pretty spontaneous, but I didn't have anything going on, so I reluctantly agreed to go with him. I knew he would give me a hard time if I refused, and honestly, the idea of a party sounded better than being alone. Alex lived a few towns over, so it made more sense for us to drive separately. He gave me the address, and I was on my way. The second I pulled onto the street, Alex bailed at the last minute. I was super frustrated. How could he do this to me? There I was, feeling like a complete idiot outside a stranger's house. Annoyed but determined not to waste the night, I decided to go in. I'd driven all the way there, so I thought, might as well go inside. I walked up the front steps and knocked on the door. The host, Jake, greeted me warmly. He was instantly likable, charismatic, and friendly without being overbearing. He introduced me around, and things were actually less awkward than I had anticipated. People were really friendly, despite not knowing who I was. There were even a few girls I had my eyes on. I decided to enjoy the party and hit the booze hard. It was getting pretty late, but the party was still raging. Admittedly, I might have overdone it with the drinking. At one point, I was so nauseous and dizzy that I needed a break. It must have been close to 2 a.m. I went upstairs to look for a bathroom, but they were all occupied. The house was deceptively big, and I was literally getting lost, stumbling through the maze of hallways. Eventually, I found a door leading to what seemed like an attic or storage room. Desperate for privacy, I figured it was as good a place as any to pull myself together. I groped around blindly for a light switch, but found none. It was definitely an attic, with dust everywhere. There was a window in the far corner which I opened, allowing the cool night breeze to wash over me. For a moment, I seriously considered throwing up onto the roof, but the breeze somewhat cured my nausea. I kept my head out of the window, enjoying the quiet contrast to the chaos downstairs. Just as I was about to close the window and head back, I heard a faint noise, footsteps on the roof shingles. That didn't make any sense. Was I going crazy? Curious, I climbed out onto the roof. In all honesty, there was probably a 0% chance I would have done that if I had been sober. I slowly stood up and looked around in the moonlight. What I saw was terrifying. 2 masked figures with bags emerging from another window. It dawned on me that Jake's house was being robbed. I started panicking. Should I shout, confront them? Then a more pressing question hit me. What if they were armed? In my clumsy state of disbelief, I slipped and scuffed one of the shingles pretty loudly. One of the burglars heard it and jolted his head in my direction. Our eyes briefly met, and I froze. He nudged his partner, and they quickly started making their way across the roof. Adrenaline surged through me. I couldn't let them get away. Jake had been so welcoming, and I felt a surge of loyalty. I quietly followed the burglars across the roof, keeping a safe distance. They headed toward a sloping part of the roof for an easier escape. As they climbed down, I pulled out my phone to dial 911, but fumbled in my drunken state, dropping it. The phone clattered loudly, and the burglar turned sharply. "Who's there?" one of them hissed. Heart pounding, I ducked and scanned my surroundings, spotting a loose roof shingle. Without thinking, I grabbed it and hurled it towards them. It missed, but the noise startled them, causing one to lose his footing. He tumbled down the roof, crashing into the gutter before falling to the ground. The other burglar, now panicked, leaped to a neighboring tree and scrambled down. I rushed to the edge of the roof and saw the fallen burglar groaning on the ground. I needed to alert everyone. As I turned to head back, I heard sirens. Someone else must have called the cops. I stumbled back into the attic room and made my way downstairs, trying to appear calm. The party was still in full swing, oblivious to the drama outside. I found Jake laughing and chatting with guests. "Jake, you need to call the police. There's been a robbery." "I saw the burglars on the roof," I said. Jake's face turned from amusement to shock. "Are you serious?" he asked as he hurried to make the call. I explained what happened, and the party mood shifted from celebration to concern. Apparently, one of Jake's neighbors had coincidentally already called the police to file a noise complaint, which was an incredibly ironic turn of good fortune. When they arrived, I recounted my story, leading them to the injured burglar. The man was arrested, but his partner had fled. The party ended abruptly, people started scattering, and the lights were flipped on. I tried my best to act sober, but even after all that happened, I was still stumbling a bit. Jake thanked me profusely, still in disbelief. As for me, I was just glad I could help despite the bizarre and terrifying circumstances. Looking back, I still can't explain why the burglars would choose a house having a party to rob. Maybe they had prior knowledge of the house and knew no one would be upstairs. I figured that would be the end of the story, but fast forward a few months and I've got quite the update. I was playing video games at Alex's house one night when he got a call from Jake, who invited us over for a few beers. Up until that point, I hadn't realized the two of them were that close. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up to Jake's house was that the front door and every window in sight were completely different. Was I not remembering his house right? I could have sworn the windows in the front door had been white, but now they were all gray and much more heavy-duty looking. Jake waved us in, and we went down to his basement. We cracked a few beers and started playing a game of pool. To my surprise, Jake actually recognized me from the party and thanked me again for my help. What he told us next was shocking. Apparently, the burglar the police caught that night refused to snitch on his partner and was currently serving a lengthy prison sentence. The police hadn't been able to get any leads on the other guy. Jake told us that not even a week after the incident, his family started receiving threatening letters from an unknown sender, some of which included pictures of Jake and his family members. They reported these occurrences to the police, but there were no real leads. A month after that, Jake's mom noticed a suspicious vehicle circling the house at around 1 a.m., and a few days later, Jake's dad claimed that things in their backyard had been gone through and moved around. In response, Jake's dad upped their home security and even went as far as to replace and reinforce all their doors and windows. I was shocked that this was still an ongoing issue for Jake, and I had no idea how serious a situation like this could get. Summer's fast approaching, and I'm sure I'll have another update when I see Jake again.
This incident took place in 2017 when we were working for a news portal. Our job often required us to travel to different counties, which could be quite far. On this particular assignment, we were heading to a remote area in the Appalachian Mountains. The location was quite isolated, so we had to cross a river to get there. We left around 8 in the evening and finished our work around 11:30 or midnight. By midnight, we began our journey back to our base in Asheville. The road from the remote site to Asheville is quite deserted after 10 at night. The area is surrounded by dense forests, giving it a very eerie atmosphere. Hardly any vehicles travel that road, so it remains incredibly silent. As we drove, our car was moving at a speed of around 70. Suddenly, I noticed a dog running alongside our car, matching our speed. What was unnerving was that the dog's face was turned towards us, staring directly at our vehicle. I pointed this out to my brother, who was driving. He immediately stopped the car and tried to brush it off as nothing unusual. We saw the dog cross the road and disappear into the fields on the other side. My brother suggested I take over driving while he recited some prayers. I started driving at a normal speed. The surroundings were dense with forests, and from time to time we heard what sounded like a baby crying or a woman's voice. My brother told me not to be scared and to keep driving. By God's grace, we reached Asheville without any issues. However, about 7 or 8 days later, my brother had an accident in the same area. His hand was severely fractured, and to this day, it hasn't fully healed.
This unsettling situation began about a month ago, but let me provide some background first. I'm 24 years old and live with my parents. My family has always struggled financially, and most of my income goes towards supporting our household. My relationship with my parents isn't great. We argue a lot, and when I'm not working or with friends, I keep to myself. Fitness has always been my escape, a way to clear my mind while giving me an excuse to leave the house. There's a park about a 10-minute drive from my home that has a workout area with pull-up bars, dip bars, and other calisthenic equipment. During the summer, I like to go there to work out because the natural surroundings help calm my mind. I prefer going at night to avoid the daytime crowds. One night, while my parents were arguing, I decided to head to the park to work out. It was a sweltering summer night, probably around 85 degrees. I remember the humid air as I walked to my old white sedan in the driveway. I started the engine, rolled down the windows, and let the warm breeze flow through my hair as I drove to the park. When I arrived, it was around 10 or 11 p.m. and the park was deserted. I love this park not only for its workout facilities, but also for its beautiful scenery and the view of downtown from the hilltop. I started my workout on the pull-up bar, not really counting repetitions, just going until I couldn't do any more. Between sets, as I was loosening up my arms, an indescribable feeling came over me, and I turned around. Standing just a foot away from me was a tall, disheveled man. I screamed and jumped back, startled. He let out a loud, raspy laugh and apologized, saying he didn't mean to scare me. His appearance and mannerisms were extremely odd, and he was uncomfortably close. I asked why he was so close, and he said he lived there and often saw me working out. He then asked if I could teach him some exercises. I'm not a confrontational person, and I really just wanted to be left alone. I awkwardly but politely told him I was just going to finish my pull-ups and leave. As I continued my workout, I felt his eyes on me. His words lingered in my mind. He sees me here all the time. That made me uneasy, but I tried to ignore it. Then something really bizarre happened. As I was about to finish my set, I heard him mutter my full name. My blood ran cold. I jumped off the bar and slowly backed away, asking in a shaky voice how he knew my name. He just stared at me with a crazed, wide-eyed smile. I felt an awful sensation in my gut, like something terrible was about to happen. Without another word, I quickly walked back to my car. I felt his gaze on me as I retreated, but thankfully he didn't follow. Before I left, I looked back one last time and saw him trying to do a pull-up in the exact spot I had been. I drove home, questioning whether I had really heard him say my name or if I had imagined it. The next morning, I woke up early for work and noticed an unmarked envelope at the front door. It was addressed to me. I took it with me, planning to open it later. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and opened the envelope. To my horror, it contained 10 photos of me, all taken without my knowledge. There were pictures of me in my car, at work, and at the park. The creepiest one was of me sleeping, taken from outside my window. I felt nauseous and scared. I showed the photos to my boss and left work immediately, heading straight to the police. I explained my encounter at the park and gave them the photos. They said they would investigate. I told my parents, and for the first time in a long time, they showed me some sympathy. Since then, more strange things have happened. A few nights later, at around 3 a.m., I woke up to knocks at the door. I didn't open it, fearing the worst. Another time, I found a sticky note with a heart drawn in Sharpie on my car window. I reported this to the police, and they said they would start a stalker investigation. It's been a month, and I haven't heard back from them yet. My parents are now looking for a new place to live, which is difficult given our financial situation. I'll update if anything else happens, but for now, I'm living in a constant state of high alert. This story takes place in the quiet town of Woodhaven, nestled on the edge of an expansive forest. The tale was shared with me by Alex, a close friend who experienced it firsthand. Woodhaven is an old, sprawling area with several historical segments. Alex's family had recently moved into one of the older, more dilapidated houses in the town, a place steeped in unsettling history. From the moment they stepped inside, the house felt off. The walls bore the scars of time, with cracks snaking up like ominous veins. They were told the house had once been used by soldiers during a long-forgotten war, serving as a makeshift camp and possibly even a prison. The very air inside seemed heavy with the weight of the past. Alex, his brother Daniel, and their parents settled in, but it wasn't long before strange things began to happen. The first night, as Alex and Daniel lay in their room, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the corridor outside their door. At first, they dismissed it as the house settling, but the sounds grew louder and more deliberate. Someone or something was walking the halls at night. The footsteps were accompanied by heavy, labored breathing. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The darkness in their room seemed to thicken, pressing in on them. Alex, terrified, shook Daniel awake. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Daniel, trying to stay calm, listened intently. "It's probably nothing. Just go back to sleep." But the noises continued, night after night. One evening, Alex decided he had to know what was causing them. He armed himself with his father's old glow-in-the-dark rosary and crept out of bed. The house was pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of the rosary beads. He moved slowly, each step feeling like it could be his last. As Alex approached the door, he heard whispering, two distinct voices, low and urgent, like conspirators in the night. He pressed his ear to the door, trying to make out the words. Suddenly, a loud thud reverberated through the house, and Alex was thrown back from the door, landing several feet away. His heart pounded as he scrambled back to his bed, Daniel already awake and asking what had happened. They turned on the light and cautiously approached the door. There was nothing there. The corridor was empty, the whispers and footsteps gone. The only sign of disturbance was a chair that had been knocked over near the hallway. Their parents, awoken by the commotion, dismissed it as a bad dream, but Alex and Daniel knew better. The next few nights were quiet, but an uneasy feeling lingered. Alex couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Then one night, things escalated. Daniel needed to use the bathroom, which was down the hall. As he opened the door and stepped into the corridor, he froze. The dim light from outside cast eerie shadows, and Daniel swore he saw a small figure crouching near the dining table. The figure was humanoid, but unnervingly small, like a child, yet with a malevolent presence. Before Daniel could react, the figure lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. He screamed, thrashing as the unseen force seemed to press down on him. The family rushed out, lights flicking on, to find Daniel pale and shaky, insisting something had attacked him. They saw no one, but the fear in Daniel's eyes was unmistakable. The next morning, Daniel was feverish, and a doctor was called. The diagnosis was stress-induced, but Alex and Daniel knew it was something more sinister. Their parents, now genuinely concerned, sought help from the local priest, Father Matthias. He was known for his ability to deal with supernatural disturbances. Father Matthias arrived and immediately sensed the dark presence in the house. He performed a blessing, walking through each room with holy water and prayers. When he reached Alex and Daniel's room, he stopped, his face pale. "There's something very old and very angry here," he said. It has been disturbed and does not want to leave. He noticed an old rope hanging from a beam in the corridor, a relic from the house's dark past. "This needs to be removed," he said. "It carries the pain and suffering of those who were here before." The family took down the rope and buried it far from the house. Father Matthias placed blessed nails in each corner of the rooms and instructed the family to say prayers every night. For a while, the house was peaceful, but the tranquility was short-lived. One evening, as Alex's mother was cooking, she saw the pestle grinding spices by itself, as if an invisible hand was at work. She screamed, and the pestle clattered to the floor. Dishes began to rattle and fall, the kitchen turning into a chaotic mess. That was the final straw. The family decided to leave, applying for a different house. They moved out, leaving the haunted past behind. Alex and Daniel never forgot those nights of terror in Woodhaven. The new house was peaceful, but the memory of what they had experienced lingered, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that lurk just beyond our understanding.